For generations, the story has been told the same way, like a historical earthquake that shattered the ancient Balkans forever. In the 6th and 7th centuries, it is said that vast Slavic tribes poured south out of the forests and plains, flooding into the Balkans in such numbers that the older populations were swept aside, absorbed, or erased. Rivers of migrants crossed mountains, seized farmland, burned towns, and filled the vacuum left by plague, war, and collapsing imperial control. So complete was this so-called transformation that the Balkans, once dominated by Greek, Latin, and older Balkan languages, emerged centuries later, speaking almost entirely Slavic tongues. The implication feels simple and powerful. If the languages changed so completely, then surely the people must have changed too. And so the myth of demographic replacement took hold, that the Balkans were emptied, refilled, and reborn as Slavic lands, a clean break from the ancient world. But there is a question that refuses to go away, and it sits right at the center of modern genetics. If this Slavic flood truly replaced entire populations, then why do so many modern Balkan groups who speak Slavic languages still cluster genetically closer to ancient Balkan populations than to modern Northern Slavs? Why does the DNA keep whispering continuity where the narrative insists on rupture? In some regions, the signatures of northern lineages do appear more strongly, especially in certain paternal lines linked to historical movement. Yet when you zoom out to the full genetic picture, the total ancestry that reflects mothers and fathers together, a different pattern often emerges, one of deep regional roots, layered with later influences rather than erased by them. It creates a tension between language and blood, between identity and ancestry, between what people say happened and what the body remembers. And that tension forces us to confront a possibility many never consider. Before we continue, thank you for watching this far. It honestly means a lot. I wanted to take just a few seconds to tell you that we now have our own membership community here on the channel. If you enjoy these deep dives into Balkan and Albanian history, if you feel proud seeing our stories told properly, and if you want to support the channel directly, you can join our members by clicking the button below. Members get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes posts, exclusive polls where you help choose future topics. And for the higher tiers, your name even appears at the end of every documentary. It's completely optional, but it helps me invest more time, more research, and bring you even better content. Let's get back to our story. What if the Slavic migrations were real and sometimes destructive, but their demographic impact was uneven, complex, and deeply human rather than apocalyptic? What if smaller but influential groups of Slavic-speaking newcomers entered a fragmented world, rose to military and social power, mixed primarily through male line dominance, and then spread their language and culture far beyond the limits of their actual numbers? In that scenario, the Balkans did not become Slavic because millions arrived, but because the language of survival, alliance, and authority shifted, and people, being human, adapted. That would make the Slavic flood not a tidal wave washing populations away, but a cultural current moving through an already ancient and deeply rooted society, changing what people sounded like without necessarily changing who they were. This is the mystery we are going to test. Was the Slavic transformation of the Balkans really a mass replacement, or a genetic trick of history created by elite dominance, language shift, and uneven regional mixing? To find out, we have to go back into the crumbling world of late antiquity and the early medieval period, to see not only who moved, but how power, collapse, identity, and necessity turned movement into memory, and memory into myth. Here is where the story starts to twist, because on the surface, the genetic data sometimes seems to agree with the idea of a great Slavic tide rolling south, But when looked at more carefully, it often feels more like a trick of population structure than a clean demographic replacement, and that is where the real controversy lives. Because modern Balkan populations often carry paternal lineages that are common in early Slavic groups. Yet when the whole genome is examined, the deeper signal still ties many of them closer to ancient Balkan populations than to northern Slavic ones. Which means the picture is not simply a case of new people erasing old ones, but rather a pattern that suggests male-biased migration, elite or warrior groups, intermarrying with largely local communities, language shifting over generations, an identity following power and culture, rather than strict biological ancestry. And this is where the foothold of the Byzantine world matters, because frontier societies negotiated raiding alliances, military service, and land grants, and these created the perfect environment for Slavic male lines to expand far faster than their absolute numbers might suggest. So, to an archaeologist, it can feel like a flood to a political historian. It can feel like collapse, and to a geneticist, it can look like replacement. But underneath it all, there remains a quiet continuity of ancient Balkan ancestry, especially in the south, which refuses to disappear, even when the surface layer of language and paternal lines tells a very different story. And this tension between what looks true and what is true is what turns the Slavic migration from a simple invasion story into something far more complex and far more uncomfortable, because it forces the question of how much of identity is blood and how much of it is power, culture, and survival. Now the focus shifts to the regions where the Slavic advance does begin to resemble something closer to a demographic wave, because not every landscape resisted. Not every frontier absorbed newcomers into an older genetic base, and in parts of Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and the Northern Balkans, the signal of early Slavic ancestry is far stronger and far more uniform, which suggests that in some zones, the arrival of Slavic-speaking communities was not just elite dominance or male line expansion, but a full-scale resettling of land forests, cleared fields carved from river valleys, and entire village structures, transplanted rather than blended. And this is supported not only by genetics, but also by archaeology, which shows abrupt cultural change, new burial customs, and settlement patterns, replacing rather than merging with earlier layers. So in these areas, the migration model feels heavier, more visible, more real, and the old populations either moved absorbed or slowly vanished into the new social fabric over generations. And what makes this contrast so important is that it proves the story was not one size fits all, because while southern Balkan groups still cluster genetically closer to ancient local populations, many communities further north align much more strongly with early Slavic profiles, which means that the Slavic world was built through different mechanisms, in different places, sometimes through numbers, sometimes through power, and sometimes through slow cultural gravity. And when the Byzantine frontier, politics, warfare, famine, and shifting alliances are added to this picture, it becomes clear that people were not static pieces on a map, but living communities adapting to new rulers, new landscapes, and new opportunities. So the so-called Slavic flood did exist, but only in patches and streaks washing hard over some regions, while merely brushing the surface of others. Which is exactly why the genetic map today looks less like a conquered continent, and more like a mosaic of migrations, inheritances, and historical accidents that never fully erased what came before, but in some places came very close. This is where everything finally comes together, because the genetic record, the chronicles, and the archaeology all tell parts of the truth, but none of them tell the whole story on their own. And when they are layered over each other, a clearer picture starts to form, not of a single unstoppable Slavic flood, washing the Balkans clean of its earlier peoples, but of a mixed and uneven process where some regions experienced real demographic replacement, while others absorb newcomers into an older genetic and cultural foundation. And this explains the paradox that modern Balkan populations can speak Slavic languages and carry strong Slavic paternal lineages, yet still cluster genetically closer to ancient Balkan groups than to northern Slavic ones, showing that language and identity can shift far faster than the deep structure of a population, and that power, religion, land ownership, and military organization, especially under the Byzantine system, could reshape whole societies without needing to replace the majority of the people living in them. But it also shows that to the north and in certain frontier regions, the story really was closer to the traditional narrative, complete with village resettlement, new cultural layers and communities that were Slavic in both blood and tongue from the outset. So the old question of whether the Slavs replaced the Balkans or simply joined and transformed it turns out to be the wrong question, because the real answer sits in the uncomfortable middle, where replacement and continuity coexist sometimes even in the same valley, and the so-called Slavic identity that emerges from this process is not a singular essence, but a historical synthesis formed from climate pressure, migration, warfare, alliances, intermarriage, and slow cultural gravity over centuries. And maybe the most surprising lesson the genetics gives is that ancestry runs deeper than identity, while identity changes faster than blood. And when this is understood, the Balkans stop looking like a land that was ever wiped clean, and instead appear as a palimpsest of older and newer peoples layered together where the past never fully disappears. It only writes over itself again and again, leaving marks, traces, and echoes that still shape the world of today. If you want to support the channel even more, memberships are available in the description below. Thank you to all of you who helped this channel grow.